story became much more fleshed out, and it became more of a balance between the two different communities.
Okay. So let's bring the conversation around a little bit from the creative to the contractual. Now you have people working together. Two of them, Clement and Damon, know each other quite well, but you need some kind of a contractual relationship, and then you need a contractual relationship with Chaz. So can you just describe how that worked?
Sure. On the really exciting paperwork side of it,
Essentially exciting.
No, in order to proceed with Telefilm, everything has to be signed, dotted, and sealed as far as who's going to do what, who is going to own what. It was a collaborative process. We wanted to keep it that way. Chaz and Clement were equal writers on the story. We had mutual approval, and for the process of development, we like to keep it as simple as possible until we know for certain that we're going to move forward to production, at which point we would entertain a much stronger, more detailed, more specific development contract. So we did our first co-development contract when we started working with Telefilm's office out east, which was essentially a three-pager that sort of shared equal rights across the board. As we moved towards production, because it was going to be a director-driven film, I feel that it was important that Clement as a director have more of a say on the creative side of things. So it certainly became important for us to kind of define what those terms were when it came to directorial vision.
And at what point did you show what you were doing to a distributor?
It was late in the game. What happened is, when we got a final draft, which was at the end of 2003, we knew that there were certain markets around the world that you can kind of take your finished script to. There's Cinemark, there's Mannheim, there's the IFP in New York, and we just always felt that this script had a real kind of American independent spirit to it, and that's probably the best market for that kind of thing. So we made an application in the springtime, and the project was accepted there at the IFP in 2004. So once we knew that it was strong enough to get into that market, we figured, okay, we're ready to take this script and start shopping it around. But we waited first for the feedback from the IFP market before we did that. And I think we first sent the script to Seville in 2005, I think. Yeah. Early 2005, which is where John entered into the picture.
So let's just turn it over to John for a minute. And John, do you recall what attracted you to the project?
I think it's because Clement and Damon are so damn good looking.
John.
Sure, I'll take me.
No, I think for us, Seville was really, we were looking for exactly the type of project that Damon was describing. We were, we were sort of looking as a Canadian distributor with all the challenges, Telefilm was facing, all the challenges we were facing as a Canadian distributor. We were looking for projects that were sort of going to try to change the so-called Canadian model of what types of films were being brought to the market. And we really felt that Boys Game was, as Damon said, was sort of more in the sort of American indie spirit of filmmaking, which are the types of films that we haven't traditionally seen in Canadian filmmaking. So I think really, I believe, David, it was probably 2 years, was it 2 festivals ago that we sat down?
Yeah, when we first had a conversation. Yeah.
Besides the history, I think it's probably important to go into a little more depth about what we mean by that American indie film. It's fresh, it's original, it's not derivative, it has an authenticity and an integrity.
And it's emphatically said in Halifax.
Yeah, it's funny that we're talking about the spirit of an American independent, I think, in that there's a clearly defined story. You start at the beginning, you move through a series of conflicts and challenges, and then you come to an end. And I think part of that is the packaging. And when we first sent the script to John...
We want to go here, Damon.
I think we must. It's just going to give everybody a sense of like what you really struggle with in this country. You need to have cast attachment. And at that point, we'd had a Canadian star attached who had had a nice reputation in the United States, who was also a very busy young actor, and he was for the white lead in the film. At that point, we'd not cast the older black lead, but we we certainly had in mind one actor from the moment we actually started writing the script. We thought this is a perfect role for Danny Glover. We had no idea whether or not Danny was going to be interested, whether he liked the material, but we knew that we had to try to get the script to him because he was our first choice. So at the point at which we had approached our distributor, we had a letter of interest from this actor, a young white actor, and I think that was something that you were very happy about.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the challenge, I mean, our job as distributor, you know, to protect our own interests and to protect, I think, overall the interest is to try to have the, you know, to encourage, and not that they need this type of encouragement, but try to encourage the producers and the directors to go for the sort of biggest name cast possible. We felt, and I'm sure these guys felt with a project like this, and they certainly proved it to be a case in point, you know, with Danny Glover coming on board, that the project would attract A-list talent.
But again, I'd like to see why is that important? You know, it's important not just sort of protecting investors, but how do you get noticed? In a film like this, which is so execution dependent, where you have no idea what the results are going to be, because I mean, it's as Dan said at the beginning, it's such a miracle that a film ever comes together anyway, that in the overall placement of this marketplace, how it gets through all the noise of other films,
Yeah.
and all the other hype.
And it is a crowded marketplace.
Very crowded.
And what we had learned on our previous film, Lie With Me, is that sex is one way to cut through that crowded marketplace. And, you know, that's absolutely, you know, if you're making your first film, sure, go for it, I would say, because that's something that really does tend to rise up. Look at Short Bus on the cover of virtually every magazine in Toronto for this festival. But with regards to this film, we knew that we didn't have, you know, a strong sexual element, so what we needed to do was to find cast that would stand out inside of that crowded marketplace that Rob was talking about.
Yeah, I think the bottom line for us being a foreign distributor as well is, and it's a terrible thing to say, but it's just the fact of the matter is that unless we have a cast, the film unfortunately doesn't live up to all our expectations to really, we'll get to in a while. It doesn't, it just allows us to make sales in the film that otherwise with a lesser known cast we just wouldn't be able to make. So in a sort of very kind of cold mercantile way, our job as a distributor is to really push for the biggest cast possible. And you know, obviously from the filmmakers and the creative standpoint, you want the best cast possible, which is not always necessarily the biggest cast possible.
But again,
And I really believe at the end of the day that we end up with the best cast possible. So.
Okay, thanks.
And I can say, like, you know, again, going from this American indie spirit, I think what those producers in the States realize is that audience go to see stars. They want recognizability. So that's one of the tests. So it's true that one.
Yeah.
The funny thing is about the North American market, what we've seen now is that stars really don't make a big difference. They in a lot of films, I think with the studio films where, you know, they're putting tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars into a marketing push for the first week. What we're seeing now is that an A-list or a B-list or whatever name is not necessarily going to open the film for you. So I think on the lower budget films, the type of films that, you know, we're best at doing here in Canada, it's great to have the star names, but I think the star names really protect your foreign sales more than anything else. They don't necessarily open your film in Canada, which is particularly in Canada. It's a funny phenomenon. It's sort of happening.
Just while we're on the subject of casting, why don't we talk for a minute about Rossif and the process of finding someone who is at the early stage of the actor's career and really poised to break out. It's kind of every filmmaker's dream, I think.
Well, what happened in 2005 is we discovered that the